Welcome back to Track Talk. This is week 10 of the 1830 League. We made it. This is the last week. In theory, there will be a final tournament style end to the league where the two players that have been at the top of the league, Devouring Trey and MP Coin, will be at a final table with some of the lower ranked players. You're going to have a little bit of a mini playoff to determine the overall winner. But for the actual league itself, this is the last week for it. And the winner of the league will probably be Devouring Trey, just because they have enough points that I think even if MP Coin wins this, they will still be in second. So in some sense, this game doesn't matter, but in the other sense, pride is always on the line, and we will see who takes it. MP Coin is going to lead us off, and the auction is not all that remarkable, so I think for the interest of time, we're going to skip it. Stock round one, we will see the NYNH and CNO float first. So even though Devouring Trey has ended up in third in priority, he's still going to get to start the PRR, which is kind of nice for him. I don't know that denying the CNA player the PRR in stock round one is necessarily that important if they are going to be able to float in stock round two anyways. So I don't fault the players for doing this. I will criticize floating at 71 because I think that generally speaking, you want to force the players behind you to float low or operate ahead of you. But we've talked about that before. We see that MP is going to max invest in the CNO, and we will go into operating round one. CNO is in theory dumpable since MP Coin, I believe, is last in priority. Yes. So we'll see if A. Murphy wants to play hardball there. We've seen this before where the CNO gets dumped, and it definitely is painful for the player that gets dumped upon, but it makes the start of the game much more explosive for the other players not involved in the dump. So, not always a clear cut decision. CNO heading west, NYNH heading towards the NYC home in Albany, and everybody's going to buy a single two train. So we're into stock round two. Stock round two is going to be a little bit of a trash. MP is going to eventually end up with shares in the NYNH after trashing the CNO and actually trashes the PRR a little bit as well. We will see that. He's buying those shares now, trashes it, and then is going to be sitting on cash in the NYNH. NYNH is first to operate, wasn't trashed, and lays the NYC home. Is going to be content with a single two train. And one thing I didn't note is that the CNO actually didn't buy a train last time. So A. Murphy was discontent with the idea of running this company with a parasite investor and convinced MP Coin to sell out as a result. Does lose out on the early benefit of the CNO with a high revenue by doing that, but now is off to the races with a train. PRR gets into Lancaster and is going to buy a second two train. We're into stock round three. We're going to see CG also be unhappy with the idea of running a split presidency and immediately dumps the NYNH. You know, NYNH has good track with access to Albany and already bought a train, so really not that painful of a dump. And MP Coin is now a president of a healthy company in yellow. CG now needs to invest their company elsewhere, has the option of the BNO and the NYC, I would say, as the two most viable options. I would probably lean towards the NYC. It's guaranteed access towards the New York tile since you've laid that. And the BNO has some liability here in terms of getting into Lancaster. Both companies are going to be able to be parred for a decent treasury size, but the BNO has a little bit of a higher treasury. So maybe that would be an argument in its favor, but I think I would still be going for the NYC here. He's going to disagree and go for the BNO, steal that from MP Coin. I suppose you can make the argument that you're eliminating MP Coin's private revenue by doing that, which is fine. But still, I don't think this dump was very well advised. If you're going to dump the company, I think you got to make it less attractive. Everybody's going to buy some shares in the NYNH. I'm sure Devouring Trey wouldn't mind if MP Coin decided to dump it back on him. He'd be happy to run that company right now. MP Coin is going to buy a market of the CNO, and we'll just see CG float the B&O now. MP Coin sells out of the B&O, has a little bit more cash now, should be able to buy some of these cheap shares. B&O is now floated. We'll see if MP Coin wants to sit on $200 and go third in priority, or if we'll just surrender priority to CG to fully invest. Looks like he's going to continue buying shares and has built himself a nice little share lead on everybody else, but that's a little bit misleading because he's the only player without a high value private to buy in. So he's got an early advantage, but they should be able to catch up to him here by buying in their privates. We're into operating round 3, B&O's first operation. He's going to head to Atlantic City. I think that's fine. Because the B&O has been trashed, the Lancaster tile may be blocked for him depending on exactly how the operating order works here. I think it's unlikely that we would see that. The PRR pays out, the B&O falls back, and then if the B&O is sold, it operates behind the PRR, so it's conceivable that we could see the B&O blocked in the next operating round of 3's break. But I think it's probably still safe if you're the B&O player to assume you're going to be getting into Lancaster. But reasonably certain to get into Philly through Atlantic City, so not unreasonable to lay it this way. Buys a 2, buys 3s, and is going to break into the privates as a result. So that treasury in the B&O has been pretty significantly depleted. He's able to get his M&H. Now the NYNH and the rest of the players should have easy private buy-ins, although the NYNH only has the Schuylkill, so not the most exciting. Upgrades New York. Good news for the eventual NYC player. NYNH is buying a 3 train in the private. PRR lays Philly, doesn't block himself, so B&O is probably pretty happy with that, gets the run into Philly. May want to still try and get into Lancaster, we'll see. Paying out for 90, buys the 3. C&O lays the number 2 and also gets a 3. So everybody's got their privates, everybody's got their 3, and we're into stock round 4. I think we'll see the other players start to catch up to MP Coin in terms of shares now, and we will see if he's able to, make this NYNH company work for him. CG, choice of companies to float. I think the obvious choice is the NYC. He's going to sell the B&O and float the NYC. So not surprising to float the NYC, surprising to sell so heavily out of the B&O. I think this is also an attractive company, much like the NYNH was, and we may see players decide to take this over. If your alternative is the CPR, I think the B&O would be strictly better. Did he have to sell this heavily out of the B&O to float the NYC? So he had 2 shares and could have sold an NYNH and a C&O. I don't know if he had to sell both of these B&O shares. Maybe he could have just sold one and still had a decent float. Well, just a little cash pour, so leaving the B&O vulnerable, and we'll see if anybody takes that over. A. Murphy is going to buy B&O. Maybe she's interested. Devouring Trey also buying that up. MP Coin is going to sell out of the PRR and the C&O, putting that into Brown, always risky. And he's doing all this selling for a B&M float. I think we've seen MP Coin run the NYNH and B&M in several games. He's going to need the NYNH's help to get the B&M any runs, but those companies do have decent synergy, at least in the mid game. I don't love this combo for the late game. I think these companies tend to get tokened out and their runs are underwhelming, but if you're able to get far enough ahead in the mid game, sometimes you can just win the game off that. MP Coin gonna pass now. CG probably still floating the NYC. A. Murphy, as a result, is going to get to buy all of the Brown shares. Having 100% of a company is always nice, but the C&O has some liabilities in terms of treasury, so may have to withhold with those 10 shares. Devouring, buying the B&O. Looks like he's going to be the one to take that presidency since A. Murphy had to detour for the C&O. MP Coin still floating. CG, NYC, Murphy going back for the PRR, no longer interested in the B&O. I think it's reasonable to take that B&O market share so that Devouring has to buy those expensive IPOs. Instead, Devouring's going to get a pretty easy steal of the B&O, and the other players are continuing to float their companies. The NYC is now floated. CG has a little cash from selling. Devouring still buying shares because he realizes MP Coin is going to be floating, so safe from losing priority there. Is Max invested in the NYNH? We've seen that company dumped once. I don't think we'll see it again, but a little risk there. B&M is now floated. CG passing, hoping to maintain priority. And Devouring ruins it for him by buying the NYC share. So MP Coin will have priority. B&M first up. Lay's Providence tokens it. I don't think you have to token it there. Might as well just ensure that the track all works out for you. But on the other hand, who's going to interfere with your track? So I guess if you're intending to run it, you might as well. Buys a 3 and shuffles money into the NYNH. Doesn't rust the 2s. I think if you're going to token Providence, you probably want 2 trains in the B&M. And the 2 train is not going to survive. So if you're going to be content with just running a 3, shouldn't you just focus on running out of Boston and not token Providence? Save it for later in the game, hope to get into New York or Albany. All right. NYC upgrades Albany, buys the 4, NYNH, gets the upgrade that is needed for the B&M player. Still an option for the NYC to get double runs into New York, but only bought a single 4 train, so maybe not interested in that. B&O, upgrading his home, has a decent 3 run, and is actually withholding. I think with a 30% presidency split amongst 2 players, reasonable to withhold. Rebuild your treasury. Buys a 4 train with it, so not actually rebuilding the treasury, just going to have better runs for later in the game. Maybe we'll see him shuffle the 4 into the PRR and run 2 trains with a company he owns 80% of the revenue for. I think that'd be better. And the PRR and the B&O run should be pretty similar. Now that they're the same presidency, I imagine these 2 companies are going to be cooperating, which is really bad news for the C&O. So this dump of the B&O is going to have pretty profound consequences on the game, I think. Giving someone the PRR and B&O together is always a little bit dangerous for the table. Pays it out and is not going to shuffle a train into the PRR. I think that would probably be better, especially for his short-term revenue, to run 2 trains in the PRR instead. Does the B&O have token money already? It does, so it doesn't need the cash from the PRR for a token, but we'll see. C&O heading towards Lancaster, but going to be too late almost certainly. Withholding to stay brown. B&M upgrading Boston. And I think this is where I'm going with this, is that why token Providence when you're just running a 3 train? You could run from Boston into Providence instead of from Providence to New York. It's only a $10 difference, but you're saving yourself the token and flexibility. So regardless, running for 90, pays it out, NYNH single train. He's going to complete the loop and actually tokens in Albany. I don't think you have to drop that token either. There's no competition for it yet. Runs for 100, pays it, PRR, gets running in Allentown, and is going to run for 100. His 4 train run, if he had had one, would have been for 80. So total 180 for the PRR if he had 2 trains. We'll have to keep that number in mind. NYC heading towards Rochester, runs for 100. B&O gets into Lancaster, runs his 4 train for 250. So $70 difference in revenue, but half as much of the revenue is going to Devouring Tray as it would. So I think it still works out in his favor if he was running the train in the PRR instead. Gonna run for 250 and withhold it. So has rebuilt the treasury in that company. C&O blocked, is going to token Pittsburgh and pays it. We are into stock round 5, which is not all that interesting, so we're going to skip it and go to operating round 5. We go back to the NYNH operation. They complete the link up to Rochester, but don't have a token. If they had held it, they could have tokened the Albany or the NYC out of Rochester and protected Albany for a long time for both the B&M and the NYNH. So that's a little bit unfortunate for MP Coin. Running for 110, pays it. B&M has permanent train money, still paying for 90. NYC heading towards the double O's. He's not going to token Rochester just yet. PRR upgrades Pittsburgh. Probably should not token Pittsburgh, but may want to start laying track here to block the NYC or Erie from getting down into Pittsburgh. That way, both his PRR and B&O can run west and potentially into Chicago later in the game. So may want to play some defensive track up here. C&O is going to start heading towards the north. Bad news for the B&O and PRR. That Pittsburgh is probably not going to stay open. C&O withholding again. She's just trying to maintain her 100% of the presidency. B&O heading west, and will token Pittsburgh immediately. So the PRR's runs are cut. Still has decent potential. We'll have to see how he upgrades that Philly track. B&O withholding again. So this is a lot of withholds on the B&O. I think he's withheld 3 times in a row. Now owns 40% of that company. NYNH making moves towards the Erie track. And MP, we skipped the stock round, but MP Coin did end up with priority, so he may be looking to run the Erie. Maybe that's why we didn't see a token in Rochester. I don't know. Runs for 110. B&M, nothing doing. 90. NYC gets the 00 upgrade, so that's bad news if the Erie is MP Coin's goal. Now the Erie is not going to be able to lay his home tile until Brown. He tokens Rochester, even more bad news for the Erie player. I'm presuming it's going to be MP Coin, but we'll see. Now that the Erie is looking bad, maybe MP Coin is changing his mind. PRR 120, B&O running for 250 and withholding again. Is that 4 withholds in a row? Yes, it is. Wow. The B&O has not paid out a single time. C&O also heavily withholding, so both of these players have decent treasuries, and 2 companies are unfloated. May see a pretty explosive train rush here with all this cash in the companies. C&O also heading towards the Erie home. Withholds 80, and we're into stock round 6, so a ton of withholding so far in this game. MP Coin, first off, is going to sell and float the Erie. Okay, the Erie is tokened at Rochester and Pittsburgh, is going to rely on this 00 for runs, but can't even lay its home until Brown. So the Erie is a uniquely bad position in this game. Definitely not a safe suitcase with 3 different companies having access to your home tile before you can even lay it. So, I don't know about this Erie start. Maybe would have been better served by paying shares, or perhaps even floating the CPR and trying to push into 5s before the suitcase is broken. The suitcase is already, all the way down in C&O, so it's highly likely if you buy a 4 that you'll be able to finagle a 5 to come out before someone can break it. Not usually a fan of the CPR suitcase, but it might be better than the Erie here. CG is going to buy B&M. A Murphy passing on $100. Not sure what that's about. Devouring is going to buy the NYC. MP Coin still floating. Everybody else buying paying shares. A Murphy invests in the Erie of all companies. Okay. Devouring B&O. And looks like the Erie has floated and everybody is passing. So we're into operating round 6. B&M still not anything really to do. I will say there's a big distinction here in the play strategies. MP Coin has been just paying everything every time. Devouring Trey has been withholding very heavily on the B&O. C&O also withholding very heavily. So 2 players taking a share density approach, I suppose I would say, and then MP Coin taking a share appreciation, share value, and just revenue approach. If the game goes late, oftentimes it favors the players who are taking share density plays or Brown strategies. But if the game ends in a bankruptcy, they may be far enough behind that MP Coin's able to win if somebody bankrupts. Now, the fact that there's so much company money in the game makes it seem unlikely that we're going to see a bankruptcy. But I suppose with 3 presidencies, if MP Coin plays very aggressively, maybe they can put the other players in a little bit of danger. As noted, because of all the payouts, MP Coin is pretty far ahead right now, but we will see as this game evolves how that changes. NYNH looking to bypass Rochester, paying it NYC, even more access into the Erie home. Running for 150, paying it Erie, unable to lay track, but does buy a train. So we'll see if he's going to try and push trains here. He bought 1, could have bought 2 if he was really pushing for a bankruptcy. Runs for 120 and is withholding, so devouring is withholding a lot in this game. PRR now withholding in addition to all those withholds on the B&O. Buys the 4, so we are facing 5s. That's going to give a 5 to the C&O and then a 5 to the B&O. B&O is not going to be able to buy both 5s just because it already has a train in the company. So devouring has decided that he's in a position where he wants to push trains. Again, I don't think we're going to see bankruptcy because there's been so many withholds, but if there was, devouring wouldn't win, so a little bit risky. C&O looking to block access into Chicago, it looks like. Withholding again and buys the 5. We're into brown. PRR has to discard, but this gives B&O immediate Philly access, I assume. Yep. Runs the 4 and, as noted, does not have cash for both 5s, but is able to pick up 1. B&M should be able to pick up a 5 train here. That's good news for MP Coin. I think if he misses out on all 3 of the 5s, he'd be in a lot of trouble with 3 presidencies, but he's going to secure at least one of them on the B&M. Buys it. The NYNH doesn't have enough money for a withhold to bring out the 6, I don't believe. Is able to upgrade Albany and withholds, so still shy of the 6, but close. NYC, similar story, is going to lay the 00. That's good news for the Erie player. Actually, it's bad news for the Erie player because there was already a 00 available, and now this 00 is going to be very hard for Erie to access. It's going to need to get a sharp turn right here to have any hope of running into those 00s. PRR upgrading Baltimore, 2 trains in this company finally, and is running for a 340 as a result. Erie should be snagging a 6 here. It does. There's 1 6 left. And B&O's train lock, so it won't be picking that up, but running for 430 and another withhold on the B&O. Geez. The B&O has paid out a single time this game. It does have a monstrous revenue and actually can pick up the D train upgrade right here. If he were to do that, what is the effect of that? The next company to operate would be the NYNH in the next operating round, guaranteed to operate ahead of the NYC. So that would give NYNH a 6. MP Coin would be safe from permanent trains. And that would mean that CG would have to buy a D, has no option to shuffle really, but he's safe from a bankruptcy. So I think it's good for devouring to pick up a D train here. He should have D runs. The B&O, I guess the B&O track wasn't laid really super efficiently to allow a double run into Philly and then a run west. This track would probably have to run down into Atlantic City as opposed into Lancaster for him to complete this big loop. But I think a D run is still worth considering for the B&O. It's going to be pretty good. Probably mildly better than a 6 run would be. So he does get the upgrade. All right. C&O upgrades Pittsburgh and is going to token Dunkirk. I don't think that's a very important token. I'm surprised we see that. Doesn't really need the cash for anything, but it's always nice to have a token for the late game if you run into a scenario where it would be handy. This is already not going to be going to the 00s, not linking up with Rochester. Sorry, I take that back. It could, in theory, link up with Rochester, but who cares? It's a $20 city. So this is an interesting token. Stock round 7, CG is first up and is going to sell and actually leaves the NYC vulnerable to float the CPR. The CPR is probably not going to be getting a 6 train, so this is just increasing your train liability because you only start with $1,000 in the treasury. The train you have to buy is $1,100, so that's a $100 loss just by floating this company, and then you still need a D train here. And this is going to fall back to decreasing your revenue the first time decreasing your net worth the first time it runs. So if we subtract $100 here, another $60, $160, and then $800 something here, his liquidity is going to be rock bottom. Yeah, he's not going to bankrupt, but this is not a good move. You're guaranteeing you're going to run a CPR D train, and the CPR D train is going to be running for like $40 for several operating rounds. He cannot make it so that he operates ahead of the NYNH and snags the 6. This is not good. I don't agree with this. A Murphy passing on $300. We've seen this before from this player. Seems to, just lose an opportunity at the start of almost every stock round for some reason. Devouring Trey is going to sell out of the NYC. And was this a dumpable company? Yeah, CG could have dumped the NYC on Devouring and left him with the train liability. He would have needed, well, this company has a train set up for in the B&O. This was dumpable. Could have dumped this and bought paying shares elsewhere. I guess there's not a lot of attractive paying shares. I think CG doesn't have a lot of great options here, but I do disagree with floating the CPR. I don't think that does anything for you. All right. Devouring Trey protects himself from the dump of the NYC, and the NYNH is going to buy an Erie, which has permanent trains. MP Coin picking up the NYC and trashing it. CG still buying the CPR. A Murphy going to help him float this. Not really sure why. Devouring Trey, Erie, MP Coin buying a PRR. And there's just really not a lot of safe shares for people to be buying. But this B&O was safe. And I think the reason we don't see people picking that up is because, for instance, MP Coin knows he's going to need cash early in the operating round. So it doesn't want to lose $70 in net worth by buying this share, which is fair. CPR is floated. Is everybody else just going to pass now? Devouring Trey is going to buy max shares. And now we pass. Okay, so does MP Coin have priority? A Murphy has priority. B&M, Brown Track available. Going to lay Providence first. Runs for 180. NYNH trainless. Upgrades Boston and is going to sell a share. Does pick up that 6. So this is exactly the scenario we were worried about for the CPR. Now has to buy a D train. Well, okay, so I was mistaken. The CPR is a suitcase right now, so doesn't actually increase his train liability, but also looks like he's not going to do anything to buy the train. So I think I was wrong in my initial analysis in the sense that the CPR is not going to increase his train liability, but I do feel like this is still a misplay in the sense that if you're going to buy the train, you should buy it with the CPR, pay $100 instead of buying it with the NYC. You're going to pay $800. So he has to sell a lot of shares that he really shouldn't be to buy this train. So this CPR float was useless. You invested $500 or whatever of your cash to float this company and then basically did nothing with it. And in fact had to trash your own net worth selling those shares. Okay. So I was right, but for the wrong reasons. Still not a good idea. PRR going to shuffle a train out of the B&O and leaves the B&O with the D train. With the Pittsburgh token, I think that's probably the right move. Erie is going to get a run for himself, but this track is really miserable. And it looks like the NYC player did not give him the upgrade that he was hoping for the sharp turn into the double O's. So the Erie is going to have to upgrade this with a sharp if he wants to get into the double O's. Runs for just 70, pays it. C&O laying down west, pays for 210. B&O first D run and has a pretty darn good run. Looks like he's running for 390. I don't know if there's a lot of room for growth there. That might be kind of where he's at for the rest of the game. B&M, not sure where he's heading, paying for 190. NYNH, hoping to, I suppose, get into the double O's, but this is, well, he operates next before the NYC. NYC fell back, so maybe his Erie and NYNH are going to be able to cooperate here. CPR, still falling back, doing nothing. Erie, and I think still has $1,000 in the treasury there. Yeah, it does. This is not good to see. Erie is now able to run into Albany instead of Rochester, or in addition to Rochester, and there is a valid upgrade that will be a sharp turn here, getting him into the double O's. So reasonable to see that happen. We'll see if the NYC player allows it. NYC blocks that. So I think the Erie now has no valid upgrades to get into the double O's. That's unfortunate for him. Runs for 310 on the D train, but only has 30% of the company. PRR running a 5 for 240, pays it. CNO, 10% of this company, or 100% of this company still in A. Murphy's control and is running for 210. So you look at 210 and you don't usually think too much about that revenue, but she owns about twice of what she should of that company. So that's really like running for almost, $400, which is pretty good. B&O, D-Run is heading over towards Chicago, or at least trying to, running for 390 still. B&M, nothing going on. NYNH is able to get into the double O's, and its run is probably going to be a little bit better by doing this. Increases the run by 10. Erie, not sure where he's heading. NYC, I don't know, I feel like the NYC player has been blocking the Erie at every opportunity. This was a tragic upgrade for the Erie. This was a bad upgrade for the Erie, and now this is contrary to whatever MP Coin was trying to do, I'd assume. Running the D train for 360. We even see a token from the NYC here, so I don't think there was anybody that could cut his runs, but he's going to defend them. PRR, nothing. CPR, still with $1,000 in the treasury. CNO, last company, actually not the last company, the B&O is the last company, will be upgrading Columbus one track away from the Chicago access. I hope that we'll see the CNO block that. We are into stock round 8. A. Murphy's up. We have Devouring being a little bit ahead of the cert limit, so we'll have to sell, and has developed a pretty big lead in the game on the back of these B&O runs and the fact that MP Coins runs are just really not that good. So up by about $800 on his closest competitors. CG is sitting on 20% presidency with $1,000 in it. So he's out of this game. A. Murphy selling out of the CNO and sells very heavily. Did she have to sell that many shares? I suppose she did. Is 4 shares above Brown. Even one withhold would have saved a share, I think. Well, she owned 100% of that company for many operating rounds, so I think got as much benefit out of it as she was really going to be able to. Is forced to sell eventually, and now has a ton of cash, has lost shares, so needs to make sure that there are shares available for her to buy. Buys the B&M, and why buy the B&M? There should be better shares available, right? This NYC looks like it's definitely higher revenue. Is the share appreciation that different between those two companies? The B&M is appreciating for 30 one time and then 20, and the NYC is going to be appreciating for 10 for now. So I suppose that this share appreciation is $10 more, but the difference in revenue is more than $10. So I think the NYC is still the better share, right? Devouring is going to sell a B&O and picks up a CNO. MP Coin picks up that B&O. That's bad news for Devouring. That's probably the best company in the game, and he had to give a share to his closest competitor. CG is buying the NYC. A. Murphy, PRR. Devouring, NYC. MP Coin, NYC. CG, CNO. So we see players taking a variety of shares here. Doesn't seem to be a clear trend to one company or the other. Devouring still in the NYC. May see that company being split up pretty heavily. MP Coin gets 20% of it, so CG's just got a minority presidency of his best company. CG buying the PRR. PRR is now floating, Devouring NYNH. All these shares should be bought, so I think we can move through this a little bit quicker. And looks like everything's gone except for the CPR. Not unreasonable to take a CPR presidency if it's in yellow and with $1,000. You could definitely start running those yellow shares for a pretty small cost. MP Coin is happy to buy those shares. I think I would be too. CG is going to defend the presidency, and we'll see if this gets sold out or not. MP Coin's going to trash it. I don't think you have to do that. CG is not a factor in this game. Okay. CG is going to buy those cheaper CPR shares, and we are into operating round 8. Looking at the market, we have probably 2 operating rounds left, so might want to pick this up a little bit. MP Coin is second in net worth, has 3 presidencies, but this Erie is not really anything good. Really, none of his companies are that good, but they do have decent share values. So maybe a little bit more value to his portfolio than the revenues would suggest. Next player is Devouring, leading, probably favored to win this game. B&O is a great company, great revenue. PRR is decent and has a decent investment in the NYC, which is probably the second best company in the game. So I think Devouring's going to win this. A. Murphy, isolated CNO presidency, trailing in shares, trailing in net worth, probably not going to be a factor. And CG is definitely out. Most of their portfolio is not running and has a massive net worth loss or deficit. So having said that, let's just kind of skip through the operating round and look at the revenue here. Doesn't look like any track is developing that of interest. CPR has laid itself track, but who cares? Look at the spreadsheet, looking at the revenue here. We really kind of care about the difference between MP Coin and Devouring, and Devouring has a convincing lead. So this game is Devouring, so we'll skip to the end and see that they win by a pretty large margin. This game was the kind of winner's match of the entire league. So Devouring solidifies their victory of the league and defeats MP Coin, who was also, high up there in the rankings. I would have said going into this game that I was giving MP Coin a slight lead or a slight edge on Devouring, just because while Devouring was ahead in points, a lot of those points came from an alternate match. And when you look at the head-to-head ranking of these players or the head-to-head results, MP Coin has faced Devouring, I think, 4 times in the tournament and been victorious in 3 of the 4 encounters. And the one game that he wasn't victorious in, Devouring Trey also didn't win. So in their head-to-head results, MP Coin has done very well for himself, but I think Devouring Trey has put those whispers to rest with this victory. I mean, pretty solid win over MP Coin, so definitely deserving of the league win here. Devouring Trey has also been providing some interesting statistics in terms of average placing for all the players, and he and MP Coin ended up neck and neck with one another on that. So I think there's really no argument to be made that Devouring Trey doesn't deserve the number 1 spot at this point. We'll see what happens in the eventual tournament finale if Devouring Trey is able to secure that win too or not. I think that MP Coin and Devouring Trey are very well matched, so could be anybody's game. Should be a fun one to watch. That concludes Game A, and we will go to Game C. This game will be contested by Juicy Berry, River Fiend, JT, and RR Scott. We're going to skip the auction as usual. In stock round 1, we will see the PRR player or CNA player get the PRR, and they parred for 67. The other companies to float are going to be the CNO, NYNH, and BNO, so a 4-company float, and we'll be off into operating round 1. BNO is first off and will be laying towards Lancaster. Love that. Buys a train, 2 train, and we are onto the CNO. CNO also laying a sharp turn, but like this a lot less than the BNO, heading towards Toledo, buys a 2, and PRR heading towards Lancaster. Should be blocked by the BNO, but we'll see. NYNH has to decide between BNM and NYC and heads towards the NYC's Albany. We'll buy a 2, and we are into stock round 2. So the only abnormal development so far has been the CNO development. And I think we've seen Juicy Berry do this once before, where they kind of build their own little mecca of track in the West. It actually came close to working for them, I believe. But I still don't really think it's probably the optimal strategy. Stock round 2 is not anybody really having any cash except for River Fiend, so we'll skip it. Go into the operating round here. BNO gets into Lancaster. No surprise there. CNO gets into Toledo. It's going to lay the token and will end up buying a second 2 train so that they can run 2 trains. Of course, as we've discussed before, can also run 2 trains by just running into Chicago and then Akron. But not going to be the case this game. PRR Blot is going to head to Pittsburgh and is withholding to buy in their trains, and we'll get the CNA for max value. So pretty good fast start for R. Scott. NYNH lays Albany and will also be buying their 3 and their private. So everyone but the B&O and I guess the CNO get their privates. So CNO sitting on some pretty lucrative privates. B&O, of course, much less so, but pretty good start for R. Scott here. We're in the stock round 3. JT is going to buy an NYNH. R. Scott, does he sell the float? Looks like it. He's going to take the NYC. Why not? Has good track laid for it by his friend River Fiend in the NYNH. Juicy Berry is going to buy a B&O. River Fiend is buying the CNO. A little bit less cash than want to float, it looks like. So we should just be seeing the NYC float here. And we are almost there. Looks like that will leave Juicy Berry with priority. B&O should be blocking PRR here. Great. He even takes the token. Agree with everything so far from the B&O player. See if he gets a 3 here. He does, and is going to buy the Schuylkill. The NYC's first operation is going to be an upgrade of Albany, probably hoping to get into New York, potentially even could cooperate and get into Lancaster, but I don't imagine we're going to see the B&O player facilitate that. That would probably be a little bit too good for R. Scott. NYC gets a 3. CNO 2-2 trains is still laying west, very far behind in track points, but I suppose if you're going to be blocked at Lancaster, maybe it's a little bit less important to head east. Does have the D and H, so could see a teleport from this player over to Scranton. We'll have to monitor for that. Paying for 110 and buys the 3. Buys in their privates. Doesn't look like a teleport just yet. Does lay the suitcase tile for the CPR. NYNH, interested in completing the loop into New York and running 2 trains, I'm sure. Isn't going to token Albany just yet, but may see that next operating round if they are left with a 2 train. PRR continuing to head west. Interestingly, it's not going to head towards Columbus and eventually Chicago, but is in fact going to link up with Cleveland. That's probably good news for Juicy Berry on the CNO. It's going to get some track laid for him. Running just one of his 3 trains, unfortunately, but he's got another company, so he'll be okay. He's going to pay that out. We are into the second round of this phase. And B&O now heading south. I think I'd prefer to see Reading and Allentown or perhaps Philadelphia. If you lay Philadelphia, you can double tap Lancaster. It doesn't cost you any money. You're going to want to lay it eventually. Reading and Allentown, maybe you just want to lock down that track because you're going to want it before the NYC can get into there. No real competition, I wouldn't say. But paying $80 for Washington, I don't think that's a huge boon. At least doesn't token it. Runs for 140, pays it, buys the 4, so those 2s are going to rust. Bad news for the NYNH, who was hoping to, I'm sure, run twice into New York. CNO running a single train and is able to run for 90. Does lay the number 2 track. NYC heading towards Rochester, doesn't want to pay the $80 for the New York upgrade. And with just 1 train, I suppose I see the logic. Buys the second train now, so we'll be probably double tapping New York in operating round 5 or 4. NYNH does lay the upgrade, running just a 3 train for 80 and pays it. PRR, final company to operate, upgrades Pittsburgh and is going to withhold. That brings us to stock round 4. Juicy Berry has a bunch of cash, and that is because they were unable to buy their privates last operating round, so they're a little bit behind in shares but have the most cash as a result. With this much cash, imagine Juicy is going to be looking to float a company, and he's going to sell a B&O and a CNO and does take the Erie. River Fiend is going to sell the PRR and actually put it into Brown. I think that's probably a little bit of a risky move. PRR is a bad company right now, but still good chance it gets into Lancaster and is decent in the late game. So I'm not sure you really want to give away Brown shares early in the game like this. Maybe sell 2 shares and put it in orange at least, not brown, but we'll see. Instead, it's going to go be back for the NYC. JT going for the NYC as well. Nobody's interested in those brown shares, but I think if you're R. Scott, you got to pick up at least 2 of them. You got $60. You're not going to be able to afford much else. R. Scott's just passing. Okay. I guess as long as they stay in the market, it's okay because you're going to get the revenue either way. But can you really expect Juicy Berry and JTT not to buy even a single of those shares? Seems unlikely. Juicy is buying the Erie. River Fiend going for a B&O. JTT a CNO. And this is what I'm talking about. JTT now has just $30 left. If R. Scott doesn't buy those shares, I assume JTT is going to pick up one of them. R. Scott is actually passing still. Juicy is floating. River Fiend is going to buy a B&O. JTT passing. So maybe nobody does buy those PRR shares. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. Looks like everybody's just letting the Erie float, and we pass into the operating round. I'm surprised that those brown shares were left alone. That's a lot of efficiency in the stock round to pick up 3 shares in one action. B&O upgrading Philly, but blocks himself, so that's unfortunate. Yeah, probably should have laid Philly last operating round with a different orientation instead of Washington, and then could run into Philly and New York this operating round by laying Reading and Allentown. So early play was great. I think it has fallen down a little bit on the track decisions in this mid game. Running for 180, Erie. Looks like they're heading towards the other double O, but have actually blocked themselves for now, since both of the double O's are now laid. I don't imagine we're going to see a suitcase, but when this orientation occurs, I always keep it in the back of my mind. Buys a 4, and how many 4s are left? 1. So we're sitting on the poison 4, and there's nobody really with cash to buy through to the 5s. Juicy could buy the 4, but then he wouldn't be able to buy a 5, and nobody else is really in a position. So I think we'll stall here on the poison 4 until the B&M or the CPR floats. NYC Tokens Rochester, developing pretty good track for itself. Runs for 210. NYNH setting up for a B&M run, it looks like, and this is River Fiend. River Fiend does have priority, so should be seeing him take the B&M in the next stock round. Pays for 110 CNO. Upgrading Toledo for a few extra bucks, running for 100. PRR heading towards the double O's, and maybe is hoping to run New York down through this double O into Pittsburgh. It's possible, but unlikely. B&O lays Reading to Allentown finally, so now does have good track and is running for 240, $60 increase. NYC heads towards the double O, 210. Erie still blocked, but having a train. So that's kind of unfortunate for Juicy Bear. Was the operating order not right for him to buy the train out of the Erie and run it in the CNO? You never really want to just sit on a train falling back. I would have to go back and look and see if the operating order was wrong there. Maybe the CNO was ahead of the Erie. There's basically no way that would be the case, though. All right, so missed opportunity there. Probably should have bought the 4 out of the Erie. NYNH still laying track for the B&M, which he'll be floating. CNO just laying track in the west. Now buys the train out of the Erie. Should have done that last time. PRR gets into the double O's and is going to be running for just a little bit better. 80 pays it, and we are into stock round 5. We'll see what River Fiend gets up to here. We've been saying he's probably taking the B&M, and he immediately does. JT is going to help him float the B&M for some reason. R. Scott buying the B&O, good revenue, decent company, reasonable. Juicy Berry is going to buy an NYC, same story there, but then he sells it. I don't know about that. River Fiend still floating. Actually not. What did he buy here? He bought a PRR. I guess he realizes now that JTT has bought a share, he doesn't really need to reserve all of his cash for the float, so he can buy paying shares. Reasonable. JTT and NYNH, R. Scott, NYNH, Juicy Berry sells massively out of the Erie that has $600 in it, and puts it in yellow. Somebody should steal that company immediately. It's not probably going to have the best track, but it's already yellow and it's got a guaranteed permanent train in it. So no reason to not steal that. And I don't know why Juicy sold out. What's he going to do with the cash? He's going to buy an NYNH for now. Okay. Well, I disagree with that. River Fiend buying the B&M here. JTT passing on $200. What about that Erie? R. Scott buying a B&O. Juicy Bear buying paying shares. Actually, not buying paying shares, buying the B&M. So 2 players are helping River Fiend float. He's like, thanks, guys. He's now floated. JTT passing. R. Scott looking at the Erie. Is he going to just sit on 1 share there? It doesn't have enough cash for the extra 2 he needs. Juicy Berry still buying shares on the B&M. Probably going to trash this. I don't imagine. Just wants to sit on 20% of this newly floated company. River Fiend up to 50%. JTT still sitting on $200. Scott sells out of the NYNH and now has cash, so it looks like he will take the Erie. I think that's definitely the right play. Juicy Berry still buying B&M. I think he's just going to trash this 4 times. That does hurt River Fiend, but at what cost? I mean, Juicy Berry just killed themselves by throwing away the Erie, and it's going to be hard for him to buy paying shares that are safe now that he's sold out of so many shares. JTT has been passing for a while and now decides to buy the last B&M. R. Scott steals the Erie. Juicy Berry buys the NYNH. And everyone just is happy with this situation. It's crazy. The B&M is definitely a dumpable company. You know, if you're River Fiend, just buy permanent trains in the B&M, shuffle them to the NYNH, and throw away the B&M. NYNH can token in Albany and have great runs for 2 permanent trains through New York. So River Fiend has priority. He has an easy dump on this B&M. This is a huge mistake from both these players, really. All right, we'll see if that actually happens, but that would be 100% what I would do in this situation. Bino upgrading his home has even better revenue to 60. He's going to withhold in preparation for permanent trains. B&M, we're facing the Poison 4. If I'm the B&M, I buy the 4. I buy a train out of the NYNH, shuffle a bunch of cash in there, buy 5, and then buy as many permanent trains as I can into the NYNH and just let it fall. Let the B&M fall. Boston buys a 4 and a 5. Okay. So now has put himself in a situation where there's a little bit more cash in the B&M than I would have liked for a dump. I still hope that he dumps this company. If he's going to do it, now's the time. He needs to buy the train out of it with the NYNH now. Otherwise, he's going to lose runs on train. So we'll see what he decides to do here. NYNH, going to upgrade New York. Runs his 3, withholds, and buys a train from the B&M, which I like, but he's shuffling cash into the B&M, so we won't be seeing this dump. I can't imagine, unless the B&M buys the 3 out for max cash next operating round. But the way this has been set up, I don't think we're going to see the dump, which is probably the wrong decision. NYC heading down towards Pittsburgh, it looks like, running for 250 in withholding. CNO heading towards the west still, running for 220 withholding, lots of withholds. R. Scott's new company, the Erie, because we're in brown, has been able to get a upgrade for his 00, but still wasn't quite able to lay the 00 at Hamilton and Toronto. It's probably going to lose that out to the NYC, but actually the NYC is a company, so he's good. Okay. Buys a 5 here. And PRR is up. PRR is just laying an upgrade on Lancaster. Pays out for 130. Looks like he at some point did get a token there. Maybe that was at this turn. Yes. So CNO has been tokened out. B&O operating around 5.2. 2 trains. Slays Philly. Running for 320 and withholds. Still a lot of withholding. B&M is probably 1 withhold away from a 6. I would have to imagine. Not tokening just yet. And may wanted to have token New York here. I don't think he wants to token in Albany necessarily, but is going to hold it for now. He pays and is going to buy a 5. Oh, so there was a 5 left. I thought they'd all been bought. Well, we're definitely not going to see a dump with a permanent train. I think he could have done this differently and still ended up with 2 permanent trains and dumped the B&M. I would have liked to have seen that. I'll stop talking about it now, but yeah. NYNH running Boston and pretty good revenue, 310 able to pay out. NYC must have shuffled trains, so he's got enough money now for a 6. Links up with the Erie and is going to buy the 6. Juicy Berry single 4 train, still operating in the west, runs for 140, pays it. PRR is going to potentially look to get over into Albany, it looks like. Seems unlikely, and I guess it would be safe for him to do it because the other company in Pittsburgh, CNO, has thrown away tokens in Toledo, so they're not going to get a token in Albany just because he's laying this track. Does need to worry a little bit about tokens from the NYNH and the B&M, though. They have not exhausted their tokens, so if he doesn't get this operating order right, they could sneak a token into this 00 with one of their companies to defend Albany. Interesting tension there. PRR withholding. Erie is going to get a run for himself into the 00. Not yet laying the northern 00, but does have a nice little loop for himself, so has a decent run now, 140, and it's going to withhold. Why is everybody withholding so much? Are they really in that much danger? We have 1/6 left. River Fiend doesn't care. JTT has cash for a D with another withhold or for a 6. R. Scott, he's in decent position. He's got $500-ish for his D train, and then Juicy Berry is the player in the most trouble, I guess, but I think even they are probably safe from a bankruptcy when that D comes out. All right. River Fiend first in the stock round is going to buy an Erie. JTT buying the PRR. R. Scott out of cash. Juicy Berry, Erie. So that Erie presidency is under a little bit of attack here. R. Scott may have trouble defending that from Juicy Berry. River Fiend's going to pass on a ton of cash. JTT still going for the Erie, buying it at a $50 loss from the IPO. R. Scott has to sell out of the B&O in order to defend the Erie. Juicy is going to continue to pressure, so that's a split presidency. All right. River Fiend, I think he passed last time, and now is buying Bang shares, so a little bit loss of tempo there. Not sure what that was about. Buying the B&O. JTT passing, R. Scott buying the PRR, and River Fiend still buying shares. And we're into the operating round. So we were thinking about that B&M dump before, but now River Fiend's last in priority, so I think missed his opportunity to dump either of these companies, which may come back to bite him. B&O upgrades Baltimore and is running just a 4. Could withhold for the D train here, and a D train, I guess it's not that much better than a 6 train for him. With this upgrade here, I think a D train would run for, maybe $100 more than a 6 train. Probably worth withholding for it, and it will put a lot of pressure on your opponents. They'll have to sell shares. Looking at Juicy Berry specifically, which is going to open up more shares for you to own. You're trailing in share density, so that may be a way back into the game for you. It is painful to withhold, but I guess the leader is owning 30% of your company, so withholding hurts them, just like it hurts you. I think I would hold for the D here. Pays and just buys the 6. Okay. NYNH upgrades Albany. B&M is looking to bypass Rochester, and I don't know that bypassing Rochester really helps them all that much. They don't have long trains, and probably are not going to be running long trains. Lays the token in Albany to protect the NYNH and B&M runs. Okay, CNO, still no money for a permanent train, but it is going to be withholding to rectify that. NYC creates the bypass of Rochester, which is ironic since it's its own token, and it's a little too late, I would say. PRR is not going to be able to get into Albany anymore as a result of that B&M token. So operating order was just wrong for R. Scott. Surprised we're not seeing any activity towards this 00 here. I think that would improve both of his company's runs pretty dramatically and quickly. Pays for 230. PRR upgrades Pittsburgh, withholds R. Scott. Erie does finally get that 00. Hopefully has looked at the viable upgrades here so that both of his companies can hit both of these 00s. I'm not going to look through it on video, but there's definitely viable upgrades that would allow that. So hopefully this orientation of the green 00 allows for that. Runs for 190. 6.2 is the B&O. It's going to get a run west. Still running 2 trains. Revenue of 450. That's pretty good. So I guess the upside of not buying the D train is that nobody else did either. Now you get to run for massive revenue and haven't had to withhold. So that does work out okay for him. B&M also running 2 trains, running for 370, paying. NYNH, worst revenue with just 1 train, is going to pay for 190. NYC Does have potential for running both of his companies into three of the double O's, and the Erie can hit all four if he lays two sharp turns here. We look at the tiles, there's only one, and he has access to another, so should be able to make that happen, but won't be happening next OR. I don't think it's not enough track points, but that should be probably the goal. Withholding and buys a train into the out of the PRR. PRR now has D train upgrades, so should be seeing that. The PRR's D run is decent. He can get up into this double O. He can also run a bunch of this track if he's able to bypass Cleveland, so should probably be prioritizing that. CNO, more stuff in the west, withholding, going to be shy of a D train. Erie, I wonder if he is trying to run into all this juicy track that Juicy has laid. Juicy track, that's funny. Um, or if this is just a misclick. It's going to be no guarantee that he can actually get down here. Of course, if he does get down here, he can token right here, or I suppose here, and really mess with the CNO's runs. I don't know that the CNO is going to be a factor in this game. He does have the cash for a token, but it should be fairly easy for the CNO player to block him by laying London with a sharp turn here. So I think the safer move is, and it's going to immediately benefit both of his companies, is to lay the sharp turn this way so he can lay this loop and hit all three of these double O's. I'm surprised to see this orientation. Runs for 200, pays it. PRR should be getting the D here, and does. Last operating round in this set, B&O with a 6 lays the upgrade we were kind of hoping to see for his D run, but of course doesn't have a D train. So instead is just running for 260. B&M, only a single train now, is running for 220, paying it. NYNH should be the same run almost, not quite. 190. NYC. So did have the second sharp turn, but this makes me think that this is a misclick and he just didn't rotate the tile properly. Because if he had laid this differently, his runs for both of these companies would be so much better. Running for 230, CNO, trainless, has to out of pocket a D. Juicy Berry, I think, is out of this game now. And it looks like Juicy Berry did block Erie's aspirations for heading over here. So yeah, this is weird. It's almost like the NYC and the Erie are fighting to prevent this from occurring, but they're owned by the same president, so it should have been really easy to get that link up. And I don't think that there is a valid upgrade that will get him into this tile now. There's not. He's gonna block. Yeah, he's just blocked. He's gonna have to find some other way to complete that loop. Runs for 200. First run of the D train on the PRR is pretty good, 340, and we're into stock round 7. Not a whole lot of shares left in the game. NYC is 2 shares, CNO, and then we have an unfloated CPR. Sorry, there's some shares in the PRR as well. So it looks like 8 shares, not counting the CPR. None of the players are really at their cert limit. I suppose River Fiend is pretty close, but with some orange shares left, still can expect to pick up some shares. Looking at the game state, River Fiend has a pretty commanding lead here. His NYNH and B&M, although their revenue is not great, he's been able to just pay out. And he's also pretty invested in the B&O, which is another pretty high stock value company. So we'll see if the revenue in the other players is able to overtake this, but he's off to a pretty strong lead here. JTT buying the orange PRR, R. Scott buys it as well, and Juicy Berry is going to buy a CNO instead, so River Fiend should get that brown share. He does. Good news for him. JTT, CNO, R. Scott, CNO, Juicy Berry passing. River Fiend last share for him is going to be an NYC. JTT passing still has shares that he could buy in the NYC. Doesn't look like anybody wants that CPR. And having just said that, R. Scott pars it. Okay. Juicy is passing. Why does nobody want this last NYC share? I suppose it is dumpable. But if you're Juicy Berry, this is dumpable, but so is this, and you're max invested in that. So I don't know that that's necessarily the reason. I don't know. I guess you don't have cash, so that's a valid reason not to buy shares. River Fiend is going to sell an NYC, think they were probably worried about a dump. Arscott has now 4 presidencies, so investing in any of his companies is a little risky, since he can manipulate the operating order and find ways to dump probably almost any of them. Riverfiend is going to go back and buy CPR, JT, CPR, Arscott, CPR, Juicy still passing. Looks like everybody's going to pass, and the CPR is going to float. Arscott's going to reach his near his cert limit, and we're into the operating round. The CPR is not a suitcase, so Arscott is going to have to pay $100 for the privilege of running a D train for $50, or I suppose $80. That seems maybe not worthwhile, but if you don't have another place to put your money, and there's 2 sets of operating rounds left, you probably will eke out a small benefit from this company. So just not in a great position. Put his money where he could. B&O running Washington and probably regretting not having a D train. Pays for 280. NYNH, nothing left for him to do in the game. B&M laying random kind of track, not much for him to do either. CPR is actually going to not lay towards the east, and I think this is because he's going to have to out of pocket this D, so he knows he needs to pay the $80 up front. May go back and lay the offboard next operation after he has his D run. He's going to run the D in the CPR. Could have shuffled trains from another company and given another company a D run. That does have the downside of forcing you to fall back, of course, but for instance, maybe the PRR wants to withhold anyways, but that would be a D run either way. Could the NYC take advantage of a D run, and would it be worth falling back? It almost certainly could. Yeah, and especially if he gets into these double O's, which he's kind of messed up, but if he did have that, it would definitely be worth having a D run in the NYC. So surprised we don't see him shuffle. Running for 230. Looks like his goal is going to be get into Barry and then lay an X so that he can get this upgrade. But how many track points is this now, when it could have just been sharp turn, sharp turn? This is, a massive delay in revenue on both of his companies. That's really an unforced error. Pays for 230. CNO is going to block the PRR from getting into Chicago. Running a D train for 360. Decent. Erie 5 train, and has to do this in order to lay into Barry. So I think that is the plan, laying into Barry for the loop of the double O's. Runs for 200, pays it. PRR is going to head down towards the Gulf, perhaps. Runs for 340, B&O 6 train, and is running for 280, pays it. NYNH and B&M we can skip through. They've got nothing to do really. CPR does lay Ottawa. I'm a little bit surprised by that. It's $10 more to the Maritime Providences. Running for 70. I guess maybe Arscott is hoping to get the CPR into this loop of track as well. There is a valid upgrade that he could lay in this direction that would have a gentle curve that would allow him to run into Barry and then down into these double O's. So maybe that's why he's making a beeline west instead of taking the $10 extra towards Maritime Providences. If that's the strategy, I agree with it. But I'm not sure we're going to actually see him take advantage of this upgrade or not. Lays Barry, not yet able to make the loop. CNO, don't know where he's headed. Erie does finally complete the loop. This should have happened 4 operating rounds ago or something. And he's able to take advantage of it for a $30 increase in revenue. PRR heading towards Columbus, it looks like. Arscott is passing on the PRR. So the D run of the PRR is going to get a lot better once he has access to all this track. And the PRR does have token money, so that's bad news for the CNO, because if the PRR wants the token around here, it's going to cut the CNO runs. B&O last operation this set is going to run for 280 still. We're going to move quickly through the NYNH and B&M. CPR heading west, but this is what I'm talking about, is not actually heading towards this tile like I would have expected. I think there is another upgrade that would have a sharp turn this way. It's kind of the funny looking track. This thing here, number 70. So maybe he's going to lay that instead of the this one, the 45. Either of those would get him there. I think that's what we're going to see. And that will make the CPR runs pretty good, actually. NYC 6 train, that's the track we were looking for. So CPR is going to have a better run next operating round. And the NYC is actually doesn't have a long enough train to take advantage of this loop that he's created. This is why I wonder if he wanted really a D train in the NYC and a 6 train in the CPR, because the 6 train is going to be able to hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So he could run this track max efficiency with the CPR and a 6, and then the NYC could run all the way into Boston, all the way down here. It would come at the cost of a run, but still probably going to pay for itself, unless the bank breaks. Is the bank going to break here? Not even close. CNO running his D train, links up for the PRR, runs for 360. Erie is now heading back towards the CNO track, and I don't think any of his companies have money for that $80 upgrade. Actually, the NYC does because there's a market share. And the PRR, he has so many presidencies, it's hard to keep track of what's going on. So all of his companies with these D runs are going to be linked up, it looks like, through here. So does R. Scott have a path to victory here? He's 320 versus 580. I don't think so. That's too big of a deficit. This track connection was too slow and at too great of a cost. Runs for 230, PRR, completes the link, and his revenue is now going to be 520. That is quite nice. Runs it, stock round 8. Stock round 8, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot going on here. CPR is going to sell, NYC is going to sell, and the game is between Riverfiend, JT, and R. Scott. I'm going to eliminate Juicy Berry. R. Scott is far enough behind that he probably should be eliminated too, but it's hard for me to count him out when he's about to massively increase his revenue by so much. But I think it's just going to be too little too late. And then JT, his runs are not really anything good. Although Riverfiend's runs are really not good either. It's just he has a lot of share value because he's invested heavily in the B&O, NYNH, and B&M. So, those are the 3 most valuable companies. I don't know. I think we have to just watch and see what happens. Let's skip the stock round and just make sure everybody has the shares bought up. Looks like they do. R. Scott has a 4-share lead in by far the best companies in the game. But again, he's $1,400 behind with just 3 operating rounds. So he's going to have to run for just under $500 an operating round more than Riverfiend to win this. I don't see it happening. B&O, nothing going on. First 3 companies, really nothing going on. We'll move through that. CPR gets into the lucrative track. Does have a D run and is going to run for 340. Okay. NYC, not sure where he's going. 270 pays it. CNO has really good runs too. 360, actually 460. So the track is just totally open. And that's because one player is running 4 companies and wants to allow them all to run efficiently. Erie is running for 230, pays it. Everybody should be paying at this point. Last operation from R. Scott is going to be for a pretty monstrous 520, which he pays. Let's look at the revenue here and see if he's going to win. I don't think so. R. Scott is running for $100, almost $200 more than Riverfiend, but Riverfiend is far enough ahead that it doesn't matter. So Riverfiend wins. All right. We'll skip to the end. Riverfiend takes it by $1,000, fairly comfortable margin. R. Scott actually ends up in 3rd. I think he had the right idea with running this in the late game and linking all of his companies up, but it was too costly to actually make it happen. One thing I'll point out is that the Erie actually manages to find a way to get into Providence of all places. That's funny. But none of it matters. Riverfiend kept it simple, just ran his little routes, paid out every time, and was able to nearly max out the stock market in 3 companies. So he wins the game. Well played to him. We'll look at the final standings of the league here. And as noted, Devouring Trey has won the league by 7 points. MBCoin at 22. King Zombie played well, but unfortunately wasn't given the opportunity to play this week, so he wasn't able to try and come into second place, which a win would have put him in. Um, and everybody else trails. So I think that this was fun to watch, and I'm excited for the grand final game. We'll see when that happens. We'll probably comment that and see, who ends up being the winner of the tournament at the end of the league. But congratulations to Devouring. Over 10 weeks, has come out on top. Looks like he only didn't play 1 week. So that's, a lot of time committed, and it's paid off for him. Congratulations. Track Talk will be back. Thanks for watching.